the audio distress call from the boat. That is the boat on which Nolan Wells went to Horn Island. Now, there have been a lot of different accounts about whether he was on the boat when he came back from Horn Island, when he was supposed to come back from Horn Island. He never came back from Horn Island. And you can clearly hear on that version, which we obtained from the Mississippi Department of Marine Research. They released it. It's not something off TikTok or Insta. And that's what you hear. Let me hear 184 one more time, please.
Detail assistance, Vicky speaking. How can I help you?
Hey, we're at the west tip of Horn, and our bilge pump stopped working. We're sinking. Can y'all please come? We have a membership.
All right, of course. How far is the water coming up, sir? Can you give me a description? Ankles?
What'd you say? Hey.
Yes. How far is the water coming up, sir?
It's coming up. We're just sinking. I don't know. Like we're going down now.
Dave Mack, Crime Stories investigative reporter. What are we hearing?
Nancy, this is the audio call from the boat that Nolan Wells took out to Horn Island. And the boat is attempting to leave Horn Island because the boat is taking on water.
The waters around Horn Island, off the coast of Mississippi, are supposed to be a place of summer escape, sun-drenched waves, and celebration. On a scorching July 4th weekend, hundreds of boats dot the horizon, packed with young people laughing, drinking, and soaking in the freedom of youth. But beneath the glittering surface of the Gulf, an unsettling undercurrent was brewing, one that would soon explode into a national media firestorm and leave a devastated family searching for missing answers. It started with a distress call to a marine towing assistance service. A frantic voice on the line reported that a boat near the western tip of Horn Island was rapidly taking on water, its bilge pump failing, sinking inches at a time into the murky ocean depth. To any dispatcher, it sounded like a routine maritime emergency, a group of teenagers caught in a perilous situation as their vessel began to flood. But as digital forensic investigators and eagle-eyed listeners stripped away the ambient roar of the engine and the hiss of the ocean, something sinister seemed to emerge from the background noise. Faint, muffled voices, hidden behind the operator's routine questions, appeared to capture panic of a completely different nature. Whispers and panicked outbursts, buried in the audio frequencies, seemed to utter chilling phrases. Voices in the background appeared to question if someone was dead, desperately pleading for someone to wake up, to check their chest, to fight for life. Yet when that boat returned to shore, one person was missing, 19-year-old Nolan Wells, a vibrant young star athlete whose life ended in the shadow of Horn Island. The young men on board claimed Nolan was never on that vessel when it ran into trouble, insisting he had been left behind on the crowded beach, surrounded by hundreds of holiday revelers. But if Nolan was not on that boat, whose life was hanging in the balance in the background of that eerie emergency call? Why did a subsequent autopsy reveal unexplained markings on the back of Nolan's head and the complete removal of critical neck structures by the initial medical examiner? Was this a tragic accident lost in the chaotic swirl of a holiday weekend, or was it a cold, calculated cover-up disguised as a boating mishap? Nolan Wells was the kind of person who seemed destined to light up every room he stepped into. A star athlete with a sharp mind, an infectious smile, and an athletic drive that made him a standout figure in his home community, Nolan had his entire future laid out ahead of him. Friends described him as fiercely loyal, energetic, and always seeking out the next adventure. To his family, he was a grounded young man whose ambition was matched only by his deep care for the people around him. On the cusp of adulthood, Nolan represented pure potential, a life poised on the threshold of remarkable achievements. Like many 19-year-olds living along the Gulf Coast, summer meant one thing: the open water. The 4th of July holiday weekend off Horn Island was an annual rite of passage. It was an event where hundreds of young people gathered on pontoon boats, speedboats, and sandbars to listen to music, socialize, and escape the oppressive summer heat. It was supposed to be a weekend of laughter, freedom, and unforgettable memories made with childhood friends. Among those friends was a tight-knit circle of local youths who had grown up in similar social spheres. They shared history, mutual acquaintances, and the easy camaraderie that comes with long-standing relationships. Yet, beneath the casual banter and shared history lay complex dynamics. When alcohol, youth, and high-energy environments mix, small misunderstandings can quickly escalate into hidden friction. In the days leading up to that fateful holiday weekend, there were subtle undercurrents of tension within the broader social circle. Dynamic relationships among young adults are inherently delicate, often shaped by overlapping romantic interests, subtle rivalries, and unspoken jealousies. Nolan had been seen spending time with mutual friends, including a young woman named Katie, amidst a bustling crowd of holiday partygoers. As the sun began to beat down on Horn Island on July 4th, the island's shores turned into a chaotic maze of anchor lines, loudspeakers, and heavy drinking. Group dynamics shifted continuously as people moved from boat to boat, island to sandbar, lost in the seamless drift of the holiday crowd. No one could have anticipated that within hours, this vibrant playground of sun and sea would transform into the backdrop of an irreversible tragedy, leaving a family shattered and an entire community demanding the truth. As the sun began to sink on Horn Island, the festive atmosphere started to fracture into something far more dangerous. Beneath the loud music and the alcohol-fueled excitement, red flags were mounting rapidly. Warning signs that would later become focal points for investigators trying to piece together Nolan Wells' final hours. The first major red flag was the sheer environment itself. Hundreds of young people, many under the legal drinking age, were heavily intoxicated in a remote maritime setting where emergency response was naturally delayed. Witnesses would later testify that judgment was severely impaired, group dynamics were breaking down, and safety protocols were completely abandoned. Within Nolan's circle of acquaintances, communication became fragmented, setting the stage for confusion, neglect, or worse. Then came the stark, unexplained contradictions in timeline and whereabouts. Friends on board the vessel belonging to the group, including key individuals named Warren and Wyatt, claimed they left the island around mid-afternoon because their boat's bilge pump broke down and the vessel began taking on water rapidly. They insisted that Nolan was not on the boat when they departed, claiming he had chosen to remain on the island beach with other attendees, including a young woman named Katie.
And Nolan was cradling a girl in his arms, Katie, Katie. And Katie, Nolan was sitting there, and the last time I saw him, I looked at Nolan, and Nolan was like shaking his head, laughing, and I was like, dude, you crazy.
Nolan was walking towards Wyatt's boat. I was walking in the opposite direction towards my boat. And I dabbed Nolan up. I made a slick comment about something, actually about the girl that he was with. I made a slick comment to him. I was joking around.
Messages from Katie later emerged, stating she never saw Nolan get on that departing vessel. However, eyewitness accounts on the water painted a far more chaotic and contradictory picture. Other boaters remembered seeing Nolan interacting with his close group right around the time the emergency situation was unfolding. Furthermore, digital records put the boat's location right along the shoreline in extremely close proximity to the island when the emergency call was placed, a zone surrounded by hundreds of other partygoers, yet no one reported seeing a dramatic physical struggle or a fall into the water. The most chilling red flag, however, lay hidden inside the vessel's communications. As the boat began to flood, the operator didn't immediately call 911 or signal the nearby Coast Guard. Instead, they reached out to Seatow, a private commercial towing assistance service, spending over 8 agonizing minutes attempting to verify membership numbers and phone details while the boat was allegedly sinking. Why choose a private tow company over an immediate Coast Guard distress signal when a vessel is actively going down? And more importantly, what was actually happening on that deck while the phone line remained open to dispatchers? The stage was set for a nightmare, and every decision made in those critical moments only deepened the surrounding shadow. The moment of tragedy struck with quiet, horrifying finality against the backdrop of the crowded Gulf waters. What was supposed to be a routine return trip from Horn Island turned into the focal point of a deadly mystery when 19-year-old Nolan Wells vanished beneath the surface, leaving behind a trail of conflicting stories and unanswered questions. The vessel, a boat carrying a group of local youths, including the grandson of the boat's owner, began taking on water rapidly as its bilge pump failed near the western tip of Horn Island. As water rose above the ankles of those on board, panic swept through the small cabin. But instead of contacting emergency first responders or the United States Coast Guard, the operator placed a phone call to Seatow, a private commercial marine assistance company. During the frantic 8-minute dispatch call, the operator on the line repeatedly asked if anyone was in danger and whether they required immediate assistance from the Coast Guard. The response from the boat was a firm rejection. They insisted they did not need the Coast Guard, even as water continued to fill the hull. It was during this period of chaos that Nolan Wells disappeared. Initial claims made by those on board suggested Nolan had been left behind on the shores of Horn Island, uninjured and socializing with other holiday partygoers. But as hours passed and the sun set over the Gulf, Nolan failed to return home. He never contacted his family, and he never checked in with his friends. Days later, the terrifying truth materialized in the worst way possible. Nolan's body was recovered from the water, ending the frantic search effort, but raising immediate alarm bells for law enforcement and medical examiners. Nolan had suffered a fatal drowning, but the physical evidence on his body told a much more complex, troubling story. When the body was brought to shore, forensic investigators noted unexplained markings on Nolan's remains, most notably a distinct rectangular red mark on the back of his head near the occipital region. Furthermore, during the initial autopsy conducted in Mississippi, the medical examiner took the unusual step of completely removing Nolan's throat organs, including the larynx, pharynx, and trachea, along with his lungs, raising sharp questions about whether the young athlete had suffered physical trauma or airway compromise before entering the water. Nolan Wells was dead, but the circumstances surrounding his final moments were far from clear. Was he the victim of a catastrophic fall between boats in a crowded anchorage, an accidental drowning swept away by undercurrents, or had something far more violent taken place on the deck of a sinking boat before he entered the dark ocean waters? In the days following Nolan Wells' tragic death, a web of post-incident actions, shifting narratives, and digital forensic efforts transformed a localized search effort into a high-stakes, nationally watched investigation. As law enforcement worked to establish a timeline, every action taken by those involved came under intense scrutiny. The investigation officially began when Nolan's body was recovered 2 days after his disappearance off the coast of Horn Island. Local authorities, led by the Jackson County Sheriff's Department, initially stated that the young men who traveled with Nolan were cooperating fully and that early assessments showed no immediate signs of foul play. Investigators cited statements indicating Nolan had voluntarily chosen to remain behind on the island with acquaintances rather than board the malfunctioning boat as it departed. However, as public outcry grew, civil rights attorney Ben Crump took on representation for Nolan's grieving family, challenging the early findings and raising critical questions about the initial police work. The legal team immediately commissioned an independent forensic review, sending Nolan's body to Washington, D.C. for a second autopsy. Performed by independent pathologist Dr. Roger Mitchell, the examination noted limitations due to decomposition, but brought several specific points to light, most notably the red discoloration on the back of Nolan's head, and the missing throat structures retained during the original state examination. At the same time, the release of the official CETO emergency dispatch recording by the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources fueled intense public debate. While some former law enforcement experts noted the recording simply captured panicked teenagers dealing with an active bilge pump failure, digital forensic analysts and audio engineers hired by the family began attempting to isolate background frequencies. Their objective was to determine whether suppressed speech in the background contained phrases indicating physical distress before the call ended. Simultaneously, a complex digital paper trail was analyzed. Investigators and independent reviews examined cell phone data, social media video uploads, and GPS logs from multiple vessels present at Horn Island on July 4th. The legal team called on prosecutors to involve federal authorities to conduct exhaustive forensic extractions on the digital devices of everyone present on the boat, searching for deleted text messages, location history, or video footage that could bridge the critical time gap between Nolan's last confirmed sighting and the discovery of his body. The case took another dramatic turn when local prosecutors confirmed that the state's official autopsy report, conducted by the Mississippi State Medical Examiner, would remain sealed from the public, heading directly to a Jackson County grand jury for formal review, a standard legal procedure in complex or suspicious death investigations.
District Attorney for the 19th Circuit Court District of Mississippi, I want to talk directly to the people of Jackson County. Our community is grieving the tremendous loss of Nolan Wells, who is loved and treasured by everyone. Nolan's family deserves answers, and our community deserves answers. Every death in the county, except those of natural causes and non-criminal car wrecks, are presented to your grand jury. Many people don't know that. We have handled death investigations in this manner my entire career. Nolan's case is being handled the same way, with the same care and the same commitment to the truth that we handle all death investigations. I understand the public's urgency to know what happened to Nolan, but we are not taking time for time's sake. We are taking the time required to complete the work this investigation demands. Since Nolan was reported missing, local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies have worked around the clock investigating what happened to him. Every piece of evidence must be examined. Every credible lead must be followed to its conclusion. Every witness interview must be analyzed in context of all other evidence. The pressure for answers does not change what the work requires.
With reward funds surmounting over $100,000 offered by prominent figures for definitive information, the gap between official statements and independent forensic reviews created a dense, fraught investigative battlefield where every piece of data held immense weight. With the state's official autopsy findings sealed by prosecutors and redirected straight to a Jackson County grand jury, the legal battles surrounding Nolan Wells moved from the shores of Horn Island into closed courtrooms and high-stakes press conferences. Because standard Mississippi procedure routes unnatural or suspicious death investigations directly to grand juries, no formal criminal charges have been filed, leaving the judicial process in a state of intense anticipation. Behind closed doors, grand jurors are tasked with evaluating the totality of the evidence gathered by state investigators. They must weigh the official state autopsy results against forensic reconstructions, vessel GPS tracking logs, digital phone extractions, and witness testimony. The grand jury holds the sole power to decide whether the facts support criminal indictments for homicide, involuntary manslaughter, or criminal negligence, or whether the case will be formally ruled an unindictable, tragic accident. While the grand jury convenes, civil litigation strategies and high-profile legal defense teams have begun positioning themselves for the aftermath. High-profile civil rights attorney Ben Crump, leading the legal team for Nolan's parents, Christine and Elmore Wansley, has maintained a steadfast push for full investigative transparency. Funded in part by notable figures, including former NFL quarterback Colin Kaepernick and filmmaker Tyler Perry, the family's legal representation continues to advocate for federal agency oversight including potential FBI involvement in mutual cell phone forensic extractions. Conversely, attorneys representing the young men who were on board the vessel, as well as legal counsel for local officials who faced intense public scrutiny, maintain that all witnesses have fully cooperated with law enforcement. Defense representatives point out that no physical evidence currently released by authorities proves foul play occurred aboard the boat, reiterating that eyewitnesses placed Nolan alive on the island after the vessel had already departed. As state prosecutors prepare their final evidentiary presentations, both sides remain locked in a tense legal stalemate. The impending grand jury determination represents the ultimate legal crossroad, a decisive moment that will either trigger formal criminal prosecutions or solidify an official ruling that may leave a grieving family fighting for answers through civil courts for years to come. The mystery of Nolan Wells' final hours sits at a chilling intersection of youth, missing truth, and institutional silence. What began as an innocent 4th of July celebration under the sun off Mississippi's coast has unraveled into an agonizing struggle for answers. For Nolan's grieving family, every passing day without clarity is an unbearable weight, a painful reminder that while the Gulf waters have cleared, the storm surrounding his death is far from over. Was Nolan's death a tragic, catastrophic accident, a young man lost to unpredictable tides and impaired judgment amidst a chaotic holiday crowd? Or does the cryptic distress call, paired with unexplained physical markings and a sealed state autopsy, mask something far more sinister? Until the grand jury speaks and the full digital and forensic evidence is brought into the light, we are left staring into the shadows of Horn Island, forced to confront the dark, unsettling gaps between what we are told and what truly happened. Was Nolan Wells the victim of a tragic maritime accident, or do you believe the background audio and forensic anomalies point to a calculated cover-up? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this deep dive compelling, please hit the like button, share this video, and subscribe to True Crime Exposure. Don't forget to turn on all notifications so you never miss an episode as we continue to push for truth and justice. Thank you for watching.